Because fundamentally what the country has not understood, and most people don't know who don't know the law, is there is a fundamental difference between a temple and a masjid, or for that matter, church. They cannot be equated as two, dharmic places or the religious places of two religions. The temple is built after a great deal of deliberation, and there are Agama Shastras which explain how it should be done, and a lot of fasting takes place, and finally there is a puja which is conducted, which is called Prana Pratishtha Puja. And that Prana Pratishtha Puja essentially is to invoke and request God to enter the idol. So once he enters the idol, the temple becomes his. So under the law, which has been also upheld in the British courts of Privy Council when the British were in control of India, the juristic person who can be sued for a temple is the Lord himself. So where is Ram temple, therefore the owner is Ram. Others can be trustees, they can be managers and so on. And this is not so for masjid and churches, which properties can be owned in the name of the imam or in the terms of the bishop and so on. So first of all, ours is the temple is a religious place, in the sense that God resides there. The masjid is not a religious place at all. It is a facilitation center for reading namaz, and therefore a masjid can be built anywhere. In fact, there need not be a masjid also for reading namaz. You can read namaz on a railway platform, you can read it on an aeroplane, you can read it in your home, you can read it anywhere. Namaz can be read anywhere. And the same thing goes with the church building. If the cross is removed from it, the cross of Jesus, then it ceases to be anything more than a building. So the Supreme Court in 1994, a constitutional bench judgment, has declared that masjid is not an essential part of Islamic religion, whereas the temple is an essential part, it's an inalienable part. So a masjid not being an essential part, the Supreme Court says masjids can be authorizedly, that is, the government can acquire a masjid and demolish it. And they point out that during British time this was happening, and in Pakistan it happens today. Saudi Arabia it happens all the time. In fact, the masjid where Muhammad, the Prophet, used to read his namaz, that has been demolished by the Saudi Arabian government because they wanted to build a road. And therefore, there is nothing religious or sacred about a masjid. It's just a building to facilitate the reading of namaz. So I think the first clarification that needs to be taken by these secular people is that masjid and mandir are two separate things. Mandir is a religious place, it's an essential part of Hindu religion. Masjid is a building. And therefore, if there is ever a choice between the two, then clearly it would mean that the temple will prevail if there was a temple pre-existing. When I was holding the law portfolio and Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister, I had conducted some negotiations for the first time with all parties, and I had in fact that time interaction with Sayyid Shahabuddin, who was the head of the Babri Masjid Action Committee, and it was agreed that if it can be established that that where the masjid stood, that time when I was negotiating, the masjid was still there, it hadn't been demolished. If it can be shown that there is a temple there, or was a temple there, then the masjid has no right to be there, and the Shahabuddin said, I myself will go and break the masjid. This was the general opinion, that you can't have a masjid on another religious place. I mean, you can demolish a religious place of other religions, as the Islamic history shows, has been doing in a spree, but you cannot build and read a namaz on top of it. Now that we could not prove because the government fell and the elections came, and thereafter of course the masjid was demolished by a big mob, and you know the history that followed it. First of all, we keep referring to this as Babri Masjid. Well, technically yes, 1526 or 1536 or whatever, this agent or general of Babur came and demolished a mandir and built a mosque there. It came to be called as Babri Masjid. But at least since 1875, there has been no worship of, or reading of namaz in that. And all interesting is that a Ram Chabutara has existed on that the perimeter, within the perimeter of the so-called mosque. Now, how can a mosque have a temple at the same time? This Ram Chabutara is Ramchandraji, and Ram Chabutara was established by Prana Pratishtha. So, strictly speaking, as an act of insulting the Hindus, Mir Baki might have demolished the temple, but in the end, he could not remove he didn't have the Ram Chabutara removed. In any case, after Akbar's time, it was recognized as a thing. People were allowed, Hindus were allowed to go and do puja, and Hindus were conducting puja. Muslims stopped going to read namaz after 1875 in that area. So, in 1949, when the murtis of Rama suddenly appeared, it became a temple. So, in a sense, all that the meeting organized by Vishnu Parishad was that instead of a ordinary temple in a this is a Ram's birthplace, so let's have a grand temple. For that, whatever structure is there should be cleared. And we do that when we, for instance, for Commonwealth Games, we are clearing so many structures which where we see ancient walls. But so therefore, that's all that happened. That's an argument that can easily be taken. But unfortunately, in popular lingo, this whole thing has been continued to be called Babri Masjid when it ceased to be a masjid for more than 100 years. In 2000, the Allahabad High Court directed this question be settled scientifically. And earth sensing satellites, laser beams, all these were used, modern cartographic methods were utilized, and a report was prepared in the direction of the Allahabad High Court, in which the investigators included Muslims also, and in good measure. And the report said that after digging the surface, which they did, they found that around the masjid perimeter was a full-fledged temple below. And this was a conclusive proof. The report was filed before the Allahabad High Court, and the Allahabad High Court had then sent this report to the various parties in the dispute. And so no one has been able to contradict this particular report. So we now know for a fact by science, by scientific methods, that below what stood, where Babri Masjid stood, there is a temple. And consequently, that site really belongs to the Hindus, because once you build a temple, it remains a temple forever, whether it's in use or disuse. While I was arguing the Ram Setu case, I remembered that as a House of Lords case of a Nataraj statue matter, and thanks to Champat Rai of the Vishnu Parishad, I was able to get a full-fledged copy of what had happened in 1991 in the House of Lords. House of Lords, as you know, is like the Supreme Court of India. So there was what had happened is one farmer in Tanjavur was digging the land for planting seeds, and he heard a sound of a metal where the plow hit it. So he dug up that place and found there's a big Nataraj statue in the dancing pose. It can be equated as two dharmic places or the religious places of two religions. The temple is built after a great deal of deliberation, and there are Agama Shastras which explain how it should be. Because fundamentally what the country has not understood, and most people don't know who don't know the law, is there is a fundamental difference between a temple and a masjid, or for that matter, a church. They cannot, therefore, the owner is Ram. Others can be trustees, they can be managers and so on. And this is not so for masjid and churches, which properties can be owned in the name of the imam or in the terms of the bishop and so on. The temple becomes his. So under the law, which has been also upheld in the British courts of Privy Council when the British were in control of India, the juristic person who can be sued for a temple is the Lord himself. So whereas Ram temple done, and a lot of fasting takes place, and finally there is a puja which is conducted, which is called Prana Pratishtha Puja. And that Prana Pratishtha Puja essentially is to invoke and request God to enter the idol. So once he enters the idol,